Here's what everyone thinks Saudi Arabia is like. Here's what Saudi Arabia is actually like. Welcome back to Christ and Caliphate. Today we have a special episode. Normally on this show we talk about religion, politics, worldview as it relates to Christianity and Islam. But we just got back from a trip to Saudi Arabia and I wanted to talk about that with you guys. So, what surprised you most about Saudi Arabia?
I mean, besides all of it, I kept on I would meet Saudis, right? And I expected to meet like uh, really, I don't want to say hardcore Muslims because they were serious Muslims. Um, but you know, the caricature of Islam in the West is that a serious Muslim is like, like a fanatic,
Uh,
right? Like a fanatic that's all about advancing Islam into every home and even by force, if example. And um, I did not find that.
right.
Like they were like religious people who were balanced and very normal, like compared to some of the things that I've been exposed to in other areas of the Muslim world, right? Like a religious person is a zealot, but that was not the case.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the reason Saudi Arabia has that reputation is because something called the Duriyah Pact between the House of Saud and a guy called uh, Abdul Wahab. So for a long time, this sort of hardcore Islam was sort of ruling Saudi society in a lot of ways. It's a very specific version of Islam. And while you can still see that in places, the country just feels super open in every regard.
I mean, that's another thing, you expect to see like this really hard anti-Western sentiment. But everywhere we went, there was a Wendy's and like a Dunkin' Donuts everywhere. Like, you know, there's this embracing of the West, while still kind of, remaining very true to their values, and their culture and their society and everything. It was actually really impressive. We went to all these malls, and the malls were like they were dominated by American brands. They were clean, and everything was safe.
Let's talk about Riyadh first.
Most of it is modern. I think it's in the process of like being like going from, where it was, or where it is currently to, trying to, I don't want to say like compete with Dubai, but there's definitely a push to modernize everything, make everything ultra modernized. Um, the people there, and like let's just say like the vibe, right, for lack of a better word. Um, it was really strange to me to see women like not wearing head coverings,
Right, right.
and not, complete, and like normal, people wearing like Adidas, right, like
Yeah,
normal
yes.
t-shirts and stuff like that.
Right. So the thing with Riyadh is in some ways it feels like 1,000 years in the past, and then in other ways 500 years in the future.
Right.
And I love that vibe.
Yeah.
But going back to what you're saying with the head covering thing, basically wherever we went in Saudi Arabia, you would always see women in head coverings and like even the full burqa.
Right.
But there were also lots of people, except in Medina, who were
Right.
not dressed that way,
Right.
and there was no sense of that being an unusual thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I would say, even a Christian who's not a Catholic, like if you went to go visit the Sistine Chapel, or Vatican City or something like that, like you would dress up, you know what I mean? You would observe like the local customs or whatever. Doesn't mean you're not being true to yourself, but yeah.
Right. So, and I think this is really, really important. I think because of some places in the Muslim world where if a woman is traveling there, there's often like catcalling and sexual harassment.
Yep.
Not even an iota of that in Saudi.
Yep.
We had a woman travel with us who was non-Muslim, not wearing a hijab, and all we received was the utmost respect everywhere we went,
Seriously.
and everybody was super courteous. So I think if you're a woman going there, I don't think there's any reason not to feel safe.
Sure. Um, you know, I was born in Turkey, but spent most of my time here in the States. And when I go back to Turkey, I get looks, right? Because I'm like, I look Western and I dress Western. There was none of that.
No, no, it
There was
was
absolutely none of it. I couldn't like, I was expecting like, judgment, right? Like judgment, these foreigners are here, but everyone was so incredibly welcoming,
yes.
right? Like even in Medina, everybody was so incredibly welcoming, and it was clear like we were the only like non-Muslims there, probably in like within, I'd say, miles of the Prophet's mosque.
One of the highlights of Riyadh for me was our friend Abdul Rahman bin Noor, who
Hmm.
we've had on the podcast before, for an
Right,
episode called "What the West Gets Wrong About Saudi Arabia."
right,
He spent a whole morning with us,
right.
taking us to this sort of historic Bedouin village. He took us to his farm and took us kind of off-roading. Yeah, there's one part there where we couldn't make it up a hill,
Yeah.
so we all had to get out the car and like let some air out the tires. And
And he had to gut it so that we could make it back.
our friend Sharjil told us no adventures before we went. We had nothing but adventures.
We had nothing but adventures. Well, Sharjil, you said no adventures, but as you can see, we're about to have ourselves an adventure of trying to get out of here.
Oh, here he goes, here he goes, here he
Oh my gosh.
goes. So the only time I actually felt in any danger in Saudi Arabia was on our friend Abdul Rahman's farm, because there was this baby gazelle there. And we all thought it looked so cute, and he thought it was a good idea for us to go kind of
And yeah, it was like penned in and
penned in.
enclosure.
And it looks cute. And in his defense, he's the family owns a farm, but most people that own farms out there, they don't actually really, they're not commercialized.
Right,
It's just like a fun, serene hobby for city people.
right.
So his family owns this thing, and he doesn't like interact with a gazelle on a
No,
day-to-day basis.
whatever.
So we get in the enclosure for this thing. It starts going crazy and panicking,
Right.
and it has these sharp horns, and it starts like ramming into the walls. And we realize in that moment, it's like, if this hits one of us, we are going to have to go to the hospital.
Right,
It's going to be bad.
Right. And it was tiny. It was this tiny little thing, but man, if that thing had hit you with its horn, it hit like the pole of one of the fences, and it went,
Yeah.
and the thing was not phased. It just kept running around. We're like, all right, this was a bad idea. Like, let's get out of here.
Thankfully, he's a doctor, so it would have been
No,
fine.
it would have been fine, but painful, but fine.
So one thing that was really good for us is we had Saudi friends almost everywhere we went.
Right.
And so the Saudi hospitality is legendary for a reason. I spent like $7 for my entire time in Riyadh, and that's just
Right.
because I was getting drinks while we were at a gas station.
Right.
We didn't pay for a single meal the whole time we were there. We didn't pay for our accommodation. Everything was just super hospitable and welcome. It really is an amazing hospitality culture. So Riyadh was exciting, seeing a lot of friends.
Right.
Some
Like
parts of it feel like
modern malls, like crazy.
and
The-
some
the
parts of
government district,
yeah, it feels like the best like Southern California has to offer.
right, except like 40 degrees hotter.
You go in the evening, it's nice. It's got good
It's
infrastructure.
nice,
Everywhere
yeah.
has air conditioning. So even if you go when it's hot, which all the locals tell you not to,
Right.
there's air conditioning everywhere. It's
Right.
it's bearable.
It's
Like
bearable.
we went, most people, the locals all say to go in winter. Where we went in May,
Right.
it was fine.
It's fine. It was hot. I think the hottest we had was 106 degrees. And that was when we were on the farm outside, but that was our choice, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we decided we wanted to do that. If we didn't want to do that, we could have, totally stayed inside and been air conditioned or whatever. So,
So Al was amazing because it was this sort of like peaceful interlude in an otherwise very hectic trip. It's this sort of ancient settlement, which is actually it's actually named in the Bible. It's called Dedan in the Bible, and then they've turned it into this sort of amazing sort of resort town where you kind of go and
yeah,
experience it.
it's reflective of the spice road. So spice traders used to come through that area, and there were a whole bunch of shops and everything that lined up, and they took some of the ruins and restored them, and then others they just kind of recreated this kind of where you would go into these buildings and walk through these walkways and stuff like that. And then on top of that, you know, restaurants, there's hotels there. It is the desert, but it's just shockingly beautiful, rock formations and everything else like that.
So one thing, we tried to go to Madain Salah. It's like Petra in Jordan, but it's another city from the Nabatean civilization in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So the infrastructure needs some growth there, because we couldn't actually, you know, get in to see it.
Well, I mean, if we had had a heads up, you have to book a tour. Yeah, you can't just drive in. And the information we had was old.
Then on the way from Al-Ula, we tried to go see Kaibar.
You know, Al-Ula aside, right, which is just an incredible place. It's a ton of history. Saudi government has poured a ton of money into making it like a tourist spot or whatever. We drove from there to Medina, and we were going to stop in Kaibar, which, you know, is also a famous historical site in Islamic history. And I'm the fool driving, right? And I get stuck on a side road, like in sand. And the funniest part was, we're stuck in sand and we're trying to like figure out how to get out. This thing has like no 4-wheel drive or anything like that. And out of nowhere, I mean, I'm nowhere. This is like the most respectful, and I'm saying this respectfully, right? Bunch of Saudi rednecks like appeared out of nowhere. There's like Saudi locals. You know, they're driving these old pickup trucks and everything else like that. And they go 4-wheeling and everything. And they just all pulled up. It was got to be about 7 of them. They just kept on coming and coming and coming. And they dug us out and pushed us out, you know. And it was the last thing you expect, right? But the crazy part is, if that had happened to me in any other country in the world, I would be like, I don't have any money to give you.
Yeah.
And they just got in their cars and left.
Yeah.
One of them almost took the keys.
One of them almost took the keys, but not on purpose.
It was by accident. I was like, wait, the key. It's like, well, it's not in the ignition. I was like, oh, it's in my pocket.
I hate the wireless key thing.
And then we went from Kaibar to Medina. So why don't you tell them a little bit about what you saw in Medina?
So Medina is actually pristine as a city, and is a really cool place to see.
The worst drivers?
Yes.
All of Saudi.
The worst drivers in Saudi. Honestly.
Yeah, like, the entire peninsula.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Driving in Riyadh was kind of chaotic, but it's sort of like, there's almost like an orderly chaos in some ways.
Yeah.
You kind of know what you're getting. Medina, the drivers are just crazy.
Yeah, I never, like, there's a 3-lane highway, and one guy just pulled over in the right lane and popped his blinkers on and was talking on the phone, like ate up the whole right lane, like right before an exit. You're like, what are you doing? You know, we're gonna die, right?
But I would say that Medina feels much more sort of cohesively Muslim, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in Riyadh, you met a lot of people, some people who are very religious people, a lot of people who are not especially religious.
Sure.
You know, Christians, Muslims, agnostics. You kind of meet everybody in Riyadh.
Right.
Whereas Medina, everyone feels like Muslims dressed on their Jummah prayer best outfits kind of thing.
Right.
So that's the one place where it felt like Italia, our female friend, had to cover up. No one specifically told us that, but she did, and it just like felt like the vibe in Medina.
Yeah, there wasn't a female that was not uncovered anywhere in that city that we saw. Not in the airport, not in the shops, not in anything.
So it is entirely possible to visit Medina as a non-Muslim.
Right.
Right now, it's not possible to visit Mecca. And so basically the rules for Medina is there's a barrier outside of the Prophet's mosque, Masjid al-Nabawi, and non-Muslims are not allowed to go through that.
Right.
We didn't try and go in.
Yeah. No.
So
yeah.
So I don't really know how strict the process is.
Right.
But when you get your Saudi visa, they ask you to basically respect that boundary. They ask you, if you're non-Muslim, don't go into Masjid al-Nabawi and don't go to Mecca. So you know, we feel, as Christians, we feel obligated to.
And it's not like it's not clear either.
Yeah.
Right. There's like definitely like there's a gate with an opening, and you know, like if you want to take pictures, and I took a ton of them. You know, I just took some video and stuff like that. Right from that opening, and there's several of them, you know, so you can get a couple different angles or whatever. But
then my favorite part of that day is we went to this sort of indoor mall, which is kind of has much more of a sort of flea market vibe. People are like selling various Medina souvenirs, and the three of us, right? I'm British, you're Turkish and Italia is Mexican. No one thought you were Turkish. Everyone thought I was Turkish.
Everyone thought he was Turkish, and everyone apparently in Saudi Arabia thinks I'm Mexican. So, and everybody thought Italia was Pakistani.
Yeah. So I just leaned into it. So the first time, are you from Turkey? I'm like, oh no, I'm British. But the next time it happens, it's like, mashallah, brother, how did you know I was
I was
Turkish?
leaning into it.
And I just like, I would just yell nonsensical things like, Sultan Mehmed II. And they'd be like, yeah.
There are a ton of Turks there, to be fair.
There were tons.
Yeah, tons of Turks there.
And then that was getting on your nerves. And then we walked by that Turkish hotel and you were like,
all right, smart guy, go in. You know, tough guy. And he ran right in there. And they're all like, merhaba.
yeah. Marhaba, salam alaikum.
Yeah.
And they just, acknowledge me as one of their own.
It was one point where we went in to buy some souvenirs. So we went into this shop, and the guy in the shop is running the shop is Afghan. And I'm like half Afghan. And he's like, talking to James. He's like, what are you? Are you Turkish? He's like, what do you think I am? He goes, I think you're Turkish. And he goes, what do you think he is? He's Mexican. I was like, I didn't say anything, but I'm like, I'm half Afghani. Like, it was great, but again, this is like the only time where we felt like maybe what old Saudi would have been like, right?
Yeah.
Like a little bit more at that and Khyber, like a little bit more of like insistence on a religious.
Yeah, you feel a little bit more sort of out of place there, but not in a hostile way.
Yeah,
but
it was tough honestly for Italia because, I didn't have to change what I was wearing.
Mm-hmm.
I did in the entire country, like, I mean, you guys can see it right now. I wear like Adidas basketball shorts everywhere and a jersey or something like that. And I did wear like kind of shorts that covered my knees. It was stinking hot, so I wore my, hiking sandals everywhere when we were running around outside. That's just me. James goes the same way as Lawrence of Arabia, except, in jeans and that shirt that he wears everywhere. It's kind of shirts that he wears everywhere. I wore like linen shirts just because it was hot. It wasn't like I was trying to like, not like, I wasn't trying to tell everybody, look, I'm one of you. You know what I mean? Totally look like a foreigner there. Saudis are like tall and lean, and I'm short and round. Then we went to...
So Dammam really just feels like America.
Right?
Yeah, it's like the roads are super orderly there, except the occasional intersection, which feels like Egypt.
Right.
There's like no rules.
Right.
Otherwise, the city feels super American.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from Aramco being located there.
Right.
So again, we had...
Aramco is...
so the Arabian American oil company.
Yep.
And that sort of like transformed the whole country, but especially Dammam. It's got a lot of expats living there. Just feels super chill, super orderly. And we saw some good friends from a village called Safwa, who were part of the sort of Shia minority in Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw a couple of other friends in the city as well. And we stayed with these amazing Syrian Christian couple.
Gosh, they were just the sweetest people. So welcoming. They loved us like we were their children.
Yes.
It was crazy. Like, they did not know us. I think James knows one of their kids.
Yeah, my friend Johnny, I met him in 2018.
Right. And they were like, come stay with us. I mean, they were just like lower like income people.
Yep.
But they took such good care of us. They treated us like, we were kings.
Yeah. They hosted us like they were hosting Jesus himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like so kind. And leaving them, honestly, was like leaving their house was so emotional.
Yeah.
Like you just had this connection with them, like instantly. They spoke a little Turkish. Apparently they had, Turkish grandparents.
Yep.
And
fled the Armenian
genocide. And then I was able to talk to them, and bridge any language gaps with, the husband, right? Because he didn't really speak English. The mother did though. Um, and then, while we were in Dammam, we did not have time to go to Bahrain, but we drove all the way up to the border. You can cross the bridge and drive over, and then you can go to the border checkpoint. And it's crazy because there's like a Starbucks and, a McDonald's and all kinds of stuff right there, gas stations. And then apparently you can just cross over into Bahrain and have, a completely different experience than you would in Saudi. I mean, they would talk about that.
Yeah, although now I think there are things you could do in Bahrain before that you couldn't do in Saudi.
Yeah.
Like, music and dancing, stuff like that.
Right.
And that's where all the Saudis would go do all that stuff.
Right.
But now that stuff exists in Saudi Arabia, but people still have those kind of like fond memories of Bahrain as their like, as that sort of special place for them.
Sure.
So people still go there for that kind of thing.
Right.
The elephant in the room when we talk about Saudi Arabia would be like freedom of religion. So let's say you're a Christian wanting to visit or move to Saudi Arabia. What can you do and not do as a Christian living there?
So there are like expat Christians, living there. They have jobs. They are Bible believing Christians, so their focus is on, living Christian lives.
When you go into Saudi, you're gonna sign a few things. And one of those things is you're not gonna go distribute religious literature.
Right. No tracts. Stay away from all that.
Yeah. So if you're going there to kind of like try and like hand out Bibles or hand out literature, or preach on the streets, that's not gonna work well.
It's not gonna work. Yeah.
But with that said, I never do that stuff kind of here anyway.
Right.
And
I'm not a tract guy.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a relationship guy.
Yeah. I tend to use my phone as my Bible these days anyway. Right. So I at no point felt like I was in any way impeded from being able to say what I thought in a situation.
Yep. Which was kind of like a couple times where we're in like sitting in a Dunkin' Donuts, like talking very freely about religion and contrasts between Islam and stuff like that. And, there are some countries in the world that are Muslim countries. And if you had those conversations openly, you would be, confronted. And there was none of that.
Right. And so I think to me, it seems like as long as you're being respectful and listening, right? You're not just like talking at people.
Right.
That, it's a true back and forth.
Right.
Then it seems to be fine.
Yeah.
It seems to be, and the country seems to want to be able to move towards that kind of thing.
No, totally.
And it felt that way. So at no point does and when we're talking to Saudis about that, at no point are they like looking over their shoulders or feeling like what they're saying is being like closely scrutinized and monitored.
Right.
The environment for friendly, honest conversation seems like really open.
Yeah.
More so than here in some ways.
Definitely more so than here's. I mean, right now, we're embroiled in every kind of like, Israel, Palestine, conflict in Gaza, conversations about like heavy conversations about race and everything else like that. And you're afraid, honestly, as a Christian, sometimes like, what do the people around me think? And is it going to lead to a confrontation? They are totally open about talking about these things. They will frankly probably shock you with their take on things and how like they would align with what you're saying. Their Bedouin like foundation for their society is very kind and open, and it in some ways it supersedes like what you would consider to be like the Islamic mindset.
So what I would say is what I encountered in both Saudi and UAE is they're generally pragmatic people.
Right.
They're not like people who are sort of captured by idealism, although of course those people exist.
Sure.
But generally they're pragmatic people that believe in working for solutions.
Right.
Rather than absolutizing ideals.
And they were not doing that like, all right, this is who we're going to say we are, but then be somebody else. Like it just happened too often for it to not be genuine.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
It was happening everywhere.
Yeah.
So the country was full of open conversations. So I would say you can go to Saudi Arabia as a Christian, speak your mind wherever you are.
Right.
I wouldn't try and, critique the Saudi government.
Right.
I don't think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, and honestly, going there and going like guns a-blazing against Islam would be like it would be like disrespectful, and it's not necessary.
Right.
Because honestly, you can go in and have conversations. There's no like, you don't have to go in and try and destroy Islam.
Right.
Because you can just talk about what you believe. Right.
That's not what we're trying to do here.
Right.
We in our conversations with Muslims, we learn how to respectfully disagree.
Right.
So if you're allowed to respectfully disagree there.
Right.
It's fine.
Right.
And I didn't feel like no one's breathing down my throat to see that.
Right.
So I think my perception of Saudi Arabia has been that Christians are able to gather there, but it has to be in people's homes.
Right. There's no like official.
There's no official church buildings in Saudi Arabia yet. That's still not part of the law.
Sure.
And before I went, that felt like kind of a bummer. But now I'd say the average home in Saudi Arabia is probably larger than the average church building in Seattle. Maybe people might not feel it's the ideal situation, but honestly, it's not a terrible situation.
Yeah.
For Christians there right now. The society is generally really welcoming.
Right. And you have to understand that, the amount of ground that they've covered since like 2018 is massive. There are no religious police.
Right.
Right. I was able to look at a Facebook ad for like a gathering of Jewish Christians somewhere, and email that link to a friend of mine. And I didn't even think about it, and then he emailed me back and he's like, how are you able to send this from Saudi Arabia? And I was like, you know what, you're right. Because I wouldn't even see that in different Muslim countries.
Yeah.
Right? Like it would be filtered out.
Yeah.
But the fact that I saw it was like, this is crazy, that I can see this content in the first place and then send it out.
Yeah.
And nobody's monitoring it, and nobody's like trying to stop me from seeing it. There's no like, I'm going to censor you from it. So one thing I would say is if you were in Saudi Arabia and you did want to get the message of like a more balanced message or Islamic, a message of Christianity that understands Islam, share our YouTube channel, because that was actually super well received by a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that just because, of what we do. I'm saying it because it really helped them understand where we were coming from, and they found it to be like reasonable.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know what their perceptions are of Christianity outside of us, because, I don't think that there's a ton of exposure to Christianity. And if it is, it's more like an Orthodox Christianity, right? Not like necessarily an evangelical Christianity, which is a minority all throughout the Middle East. We did, in our travels, meet like an evangelical Egyptian Christian who was super interested in what we were doing. But, when we told them, we had a YouTube channel or something like that, and James has the QR code on his business card, and they'd pull it up and they would, they were interested in what we were showing them, and it wasn't negatively received. So if you do go and you do need to, like say, hey, here's some resources, they really liked what we were doing. I mean, I for what that's worth.
Yeah. So I think my advice for any Christians going to Saudi Arabia is don't be afraid. Remember, it's like being in someone else's home. You want to be respectful.
Sure.
But respectful doesn't mean not being able to speak your mind.
Right.
Just be courteous and thoughtful and listen well.
Right.
And don't be like unhinged in what you're saying. And that seems to be entirely welcome and socially acceptable there.
Yeah.
At this point. And we received nothing but great feedback and amazing interaction the whole time. So I would highly recommend that people visit Saudi Arabia Christians especially. It's an amazing historic culture. It's amazing food, amazing people, amazing hospitality, and the country has taken like amazing leaps forward in the last 10 years, and I'm really excited to do what I can to be a part of the future of that country in whatever way I can.
Yeah, we're definitely going back. The only thing I would add to that is, people are going to be exceptionally generous with you, like more than really anywhere else I've experienced in the Muslim world. And that is genuine, and that you should accept it, because it's not just like, it's not something you should view cynically, right?
Right.
You shouldn't be thinking that there's like an ulterior motive or an agenda or anything like that. That's genuinely who they are.
Yeah.
And you doing that opens up the ability for you to have a relationship with them. Because if you were to take this very like essential part of their culture and deny it, you would be closing a huge door to be able to get to know some really awesome people.
Yeah, and so the way to deal with that is we never tried to pay for anything when people insisted on paying.
Right.
We just said, okay, when you come to Seattle,
yep,
we're paying.
Right.
That's the socially acceptable response to it.
Right. A friend of ours went from Riyadh to Alula with us, and we were like, it's our turn.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we're going to pay for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Which was fine because that wasn't their city.
Right. It wasn't their city. It wasn't their background. She actually made it. What was the last thing we did? Was it the airport or something like that? She was like, no, we're still in my city.
Yeah. Couldn't buy Dunkin'.
Right.
Well, guys, thank you for listening to Christ and Caliphate, and we'll be back next time with a more normal episode.